when people spend most of their time surrounded by others, constantly engaging, talking, and seeking approval, they gradually lose the quiet connection to their own essence. Every moment spent trying to be understood, liked, or accepted subtly trains the mind to focus outward instead of inward. It becomes a habit, a reflex, to measure one's worth through reactions, expressions, or praise from others. This endless cycle of external validation creates a gap between the self that exists within and the self that is shown to the world. The more one tries to fit into every situation, the more one disappears in plain sight. Social interaction is not inherently wrong, but when it becomes a way of avoiding solitude, it transforms into an escape from authenticity. People start to wear social masks, adapting their behavior, language, and even opinions to match the expectations of those around them. They learn what earns smiles, what draws attention, and what keeps them from being judged. Slowly, the true self, raw, uncertain, and unfiltered, fades into the background. Over time, this creates an inner emptiness, a sense that something essential has been lost. This disconnection manifests as restlessness and confusion. Even when surrounded by people, there's a lingering feeling of being unseen or misunderstood. The paradox is that the more one tries to connect, the lonelier one becomes, because the connection is built on pretense rather than truth. The speech highlights that genuine connection cannot come from imitation. It must arise from presence, honesty, and self-awareness. When a person constantly engages in socializing without reflection, they forget how to listen to their own thoughts. The silence that once nurtured creativity and peace now feels unbearable. Yet, it is only in that silence that one can remember who they truly are. Losing touch with oneself through endless social activity is not an accident. It is a choice to run from the discomfort of self-awareness. The speech invites listeners to recognize this pattern and to see that the greatest loss is not isolation from others, but separation from one's own inner world. Solitude is often misunderstood as loneliness, but they are two entirely different experiences. Loneliness is a feeling of lack, a craving for company, and an uneasiness with one's own thoughts. Solitude, on the other hand, is fullness. It is the ability to sit quietly within oneself and feel whole without needing anything external to complete the moment. The speech suggests that solitude is not a punishment or a void, it is a return to clarity. It is in those quiet spaces, away from distraction and chatter, that the mind begins to settle and truth begins to surface. People fear being alone because silence exposes everything they try to hide. When there are no conversations, no screens, and no noise, the mind starts to reveal its buried emotions, doubts, and forgotten dreams. This can be uncomfortable at first, which is why many rush to social interaction as a form of escape. Yet the discomfort of solitude is not a sign of emptiness. It is a sign of awakening. It is the process of meeting yourself without filters, of listening to the subtle voice that gets drowned out by constant social noise. In solitude, a person begins to see life differently. The chaos of opinions, trends, and comparisons starts to fade, and the awareness of one's own rhythm takes its place. There is no pressure to perform, no need to impress, no requirement to conform. This simple state of being alone becomes a sanctuary where energy is restored and the mind realigns with its natural pace. When you embrace solitude, your relationship with the world transforms. You no longer seek people to fill your emptiness, but to share your wholeness. Interactions become more genuine because they come from presence rather than dependency. The speech reminds us that clarity does not arise from constant communication. It grows from quiet reflection. Solitude teaches balance. It helps one see that connection is meaningful only when it is born from inner peace, not fear of being alone. In modern life, social interaction often turns into a stage performance where everyone plays a role they think others expect of them. People laugh at things they don't find funny, agree with ideas they don't believe in, and act confident when they feel uncertain inside. This constant performance is not done out of malice, but fear of rejection, judgment, or being seen as different. The speech points out that many people have forgotten how to interact sincerely because social environments have become arenas for approval rather than spaces for connection. The moment we start caring more about how we appear than how we feel, authenticity begins to fade. When socializing becomes performance, it drains energy rather than nourishing it. Conversations turn superficial. People talk but rarely listen. They share stories not to connect, but to impress, to fill the silence, or to maintain their image. The subtle exhaustion that follows such interactions is often mistaken for social anxiety or introversion. But in truth, it is the fatigue of pretending. The heart knows when it's not being honest. It grows tired of masks and longs for moments of realness. Those rare times when words are not rehearsed and presence is genuine. This performance also creates a deep internal split. On one hand, there is the social self that strives to please and adapt. On the other, there is the quiet inner self that feels unseen and unheard. Over time, this gap widens, leading to confusion about who one really is. The more one performs, the less one remembers their own truth. The speech suggests that this false engagement is one of the main reasons people feel empty, even in crowded rooms. True interaction, it says, does not require performance. It requires honesty. It is found not in the need to impress, but in the courage to be vulnerable. When people begin to remove their masks, they rediscover the beauty of simplicity and the peace that comes from speaking and listening without pretending. True connection cannot exist in the shadow of constant approval seeking. When a person approaches others with the hidden desire to be accepted, admired, or validated, the connection that forms is fragile. It depends not on understanding, but on agreement. The moment someone disagrees, withdraws, or stops offering affirmation, that bond begins to break. The speech emphasizes that genuine connection grows from awareness, not approval. Awareness means being fully present in interaction, listening deeply, and responding honestly, not out of fear or expectation, but from a place of authenticity. When you interact with awareness, you no longer seek to manipulate how others see you. You simply allow yourself to be seen as you are. Approval seeking turns relationships into transactions. Every word becomes a subtle negotiation. If I say this, will they like me more? If I express this truth, will they leave? This kind of thinking strips connection of sincerity. It keeps people trapped in anxiety, constantly editing themselves to maintain harmony. Awareness, on the other hand, invites stillness and courage. It allows space for disagreement, silence, and depth. When you engage with awareness, you are not looking for validation. You are looking for truth. And truth, though sometimes uncomfortable, creates a bond that is far stronger and more meaningful than the fragile comfort of approval. Real connection is not built by the number of conversations or shared interests, but by the quality of presence between two people. When both individuals are aware, the interaction becomes effortless. There is no need to perform or to impress. There is only understanding. Awareness allows you to see others not as mirrors reflecting your worth, but as souls sharing an experience. It dissolves comparison, competition, and fear. The speech reminds us that awareness is what transforms social interaction from a search for belonging into an act of being. In that stillness, approval loses its power, and what remains is something pure. Connection born not from need, but from authenticity. Peace begins the moment you stop chasing the eyes of others. The constant need to be noticed, praised, or accepted creates a quiet kind of suffering that many people mistake for ambition or connection. When you depend on attention to feel worthy, your sense of self becomes fragile, shifting with every compliment or criticism. The speech suggests that this endless pursuit of being seen is what keeps people restless. They build their lives around other people's perceptions, and in doing so, they forget what it means to live from within. The more energy you spend trying to be visible to the world, the more invisible you become to yourself. When you stop needing to be seen, a profound calm enters your life. Suddenly, there is no race to win, no mask to wear, no audience to please. You begin to move through the world quietly, yet with a deeper presence. This kind of peace is not born from isolation. It arises from independence. You realize that validation does not create worth, awareness does. The more you understand yourself, the less you need others to confirm your existence. This shift doesn't make you detached from people. It makes your relationships real. You interact not to be admired, but to connect, to share, to understand. The speech also reveals that when you are no longer obsessed with how others see you, your focus naturally turns inward. You start paying attention to your thoughts, your feelings, your growth. Life becomes simpler because it no longer depends on approval or recognition. You find beauty in small, ordinary moments that don't need to be broadcasted to anyone. There is freedom in that invisibility, a kind of strength that comes from knowing you are enough even when no one is watching. The speech reminds us that inner peace is not about withdrawing from the world, but about returning to yourself. When you no longer chase attention, you begin to embody authenticity, and in that authenticity, you find the stillness and fulfillment that constant social validation could never give.